where not just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history. What body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psephology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out.
This is Friday Java on the 12th of July, 2019, from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. Boston Red here on a typical summer morning. We have our friends from the University of Virginia at Charlottesville, and we always remember have a higher as we do these broadcasts here. We'll start with some of the information here. The African Cup is going down, I believe, to 3 finalists there, and one of them is Tunisia. We'll have more on that a little later here in the broadcast. And we have Serena Williams at the Wimbledon. She is taking on, if I can find my cheat sheet here, I'm not familiar with her at all. The last name is Halpry, maybe. Anyway. And in the men's at Wilmington, Roger Federer is there, and Nadal will be taking him on. And also we have storms closing in on the city of New Orleans, and the latest we got from the BBC, it is basically a storm, cyclone, whatever you want to call it, that is basically 6 meters there. And the Emir of New Orleans has informed people to get in 3 days of provisions, supplies, whatever you want to call them, and stay in their homes. Now, people have already moved to other states, so-called higher ground, and we'll be following this. But the takeaway there in New Orleans is the storm is coming and is battering in on the city of New Orleans. The water has risen much as it did earlier in the Midwest and other areas. So again, this is a climate situation going on here. on a Numbers Man, another program that we have here at WBRN and the Boston Red Network. We talked about the economic impact of climate, and it's a study from Moody's Analytics. And if you go to Numbers Man on that channel, you can of course find Numbers Man at iHeartRadio, at Stitcher, at Streaka, on YouTube, and various other outlets. Now Google Podcast, we are there. And we used to be at Apple Podcasts. I'm not certain if we're there or not. But anyway, there are a number of places you can find us. You can find us on Twitter and on the Boston Red Facebook page. You can find the episodes there. That's from Numbers Man. That's our macroeconomics program. We also have an open source report up there. We are talking basically about moves by a major provider of tools, we'll call them, for Hadoop. Hadoop being an information portal out of the Apache project. We have that up. And we have an organization called Cloudera, and they merged with another Hadoop tool operation called Hortonworks. It doesn't mean much there, but Hadoop is one of the things that actually originated at Yahoo. I know that Bloomberg and basic other people use Hadoop, and Hadoop from the Apache project. You also have blockchain put in there, some in the puzzle. So we have more of that on open source. And what has happened, this organization called Cloudera has or will open source all of their tools. Very, very important there. And go to the open source report. You'll find those things coming there. Anyway, some of the news today. CBS News, the evening news, if you recall, Jerry Pippen, the late great Jerry Pippen, and I did a special. Actually, Jerry Pippen did it on Walter Cronkite. I produced it, and this is from the Washington Post by Margaret Sullivan on the 11th. And that's the way it is. That was Walter Cronkite's famous sign-off from the evening news. In these days of low public trust in mass media, Walter Cronkite was trusted by virtually everyone in America. And he goes on to say, but that's what Norah O'Donnell says she wants as she steps in on Monday to the CBS Evening News anchor position held for many years by Walter Cronkite, often the most trusted person. An appearance this week, O'Donnell was asked, would she judge success? How would she judge it in role? The most trusted journalist in America and around the world was how she wanted to be seen. News hochos would probably settle for something less lofty, given the Tiffany network as it was once known out of the ratings cellar from the evening broadcast. It trails of ABC and a close second behind NBC, and all of the nightly newscasts now have fewer viewers than before, and it's of course tightly edited. The NBC, I believe that's Lester Holt, is there. 30 minutes. It still is approximately viewing for millions. Those who say that the evening news no longer matters in digital age are wrong. The three broadcast networks, even now, after many years of decline, still pull in over 20 million viewers a night, far outstripping primetime cable news offerings that get much more attention. O'Donnell won't be the first woman there. For those that remember, Connie Chung, she was around for many, many years, and Katie Couric were there, and Diane Sawyer used to be at the World News Tonight. Now David Muir, who long been at ABC, has taken over. She doesn't come on just as CBS. She does come on, recovering from a tumultuous period over the past 2 years. Anchor Charlie Rose and Les Mundos, 60 Minutes executive director, Jeb Fuga all stepped down. The Me Too movement got them. Incidentally, speaking of the Me Too movement, R. Kelly was arrested in New York as he, in front of the Trump Hotel, of all places, he was walking his dog. Kind of interesting there. Anyway, they have now a new steward that was appointed at CBS, Susan Zirinsky, to replace David Rose as head of the news division. I would not have taken this job if Susan Zirinsky were not the president. That's what Laura O'Donnell says, who replaces Jeff Gore. And before that, Scott Pelley. Remember, Scott Pelley was around for a long time. Not only did Zirinsky give O'Donnell her shot, but she also will move the evening broadcast from New York to Washington this fall. Various networks have played around with it, and we don't know where it is. It's a gamble, but a very smart gamble by Zirinsky, said Tom Betag, a former executive producer at CBS and ABC's Nightline, who teaches at the University of Maryland's journalism school. He sees the case of CBS playing its strength, strong reporting from its Washington bureau, including congressional correspondent Nancy Cotis and the chief correspondent, Major Garrett. Major Garrett used to be at Fox News. Beltag said CBS is trying to differentiate itself from other evening broadcasters by emphasizing Trump politics and government, and he thinks O'Donnell is extremely smart and experienced in Washington, hardworking. He's an ideal choice in part because of a strong and self-confident TV president. Oh, interesting there. A fellow that knows something about it, a former Feast Nation moderator, Bob Schaefer. Remember Bob Schaefer? He was literally on the scene when President Kennedy was assassinated. He was over in Fort Worth. Told me Wednesday she has that's something. It's why some people are movie stars and some people aren't. But beyond that, Schaefer says O'Donnell exalts authenticity because of her potential experience as a Washington reporter, including stints as the White House correspondent. She is, he said, simply the perfect person for this. But he added the touch of cautious realism. We all see we have a tall hill to climb. O'Donnell debuted Monday with Monday's interviews with the Washington Post owner, Jeff Bezos, with Carolyn Kennedy, the offered diplomat, daughter of JFK. That's for the older generation, and CBS News for many years has been about the older generation. The idea is to mark the 50th anniversary of a human's first step on the moon, a subject closely tied to the legacy of Walter Cronkite. I think the people that remember Walter Cronkite, more people my age in their 60 interview, Zirinsky was explicit about what she's trying to do, tie the network story history to O'Donnell while looking to more of a digitally oriented future in which CBS News is in a 24/7 proposition. It's time to shake things up, she told me. The move to Washington positions the broadcast for these 2 years that have such importance, placing just not O'Donnell but also the center of gravity right where the action is. Washington is a tremendous advantage, Zawinski said, while noting that would be the effect to report more deeply throughout the country to counter the inside the beltway. That's a kind of interesting proposition there. We at WBRN Radio and the Boston Red Network tried to do much authentic reporting as we can throughout the country. Going to the West Coast, going to Florida. We'll be going for the week that was. That's our Saturday program to the Big Easy, New Orleans. There's a desperate hunger for authentic, no-spin news, Zawinski said, and that is the baton that is being handed to Nora. Ratings aside, if O'Donnell manages to return even a smidgen of trust to the beleaguered news media, that would come as a win. Well, no doubt about that. Let me just see if I can get this article up here. Now, this is also from the Washington Post. So we're not having a love fest here with the Washington Post. Well, what we do want to talk about is this whole disrespect project that's going on here. And this is under the politics regime. Outright disrespectful for House women, a struggle as Pelosi isolates them. Now, this is an outrage within itself. This is by Rachel and Blade and Mike DeBose. Anyway, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, admonished Democrats for personally attacking one another, warning in a closed-door meeting that was on Wednesday without naming names. Her targets were clear. They used the word progressive. We're going to use the word liberal, freshman type, first-year types. The squad. You've got a complaint, you come and talk to me about it, but do not tweet about our members and expect us to think that this is just okay. The squad, now that is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ms. Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, and Tlaib of Michigan has the seat that John Connors used to occupy. And Ayanna Presley of the Commonwealth is convinced it is Pelosi who is being the bully. The four are struggling with the Speaker's move to isolate them in recent weeks, according to interviews with lawmakers, congressional aides, etc. Pelosi has made last half a dozen comments, a dozen remarks dismissing the group of their far-left proposals on the environment. That's what she calls that, and health care. She defends those comments Wednesday, saying, "I have no regrets about anything. Regrets is not what I do," doubling down on her claim that the group has little power in the House. Well, she's making sure of this. The Speaker does have a lot of power. When these comments first started, I kind of thought that she was keeping the progressive flank at in arm's distance in order to protect more moderate members, which I understand. That is what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez told the Post. But the persistent singling out, it got to a point where it was just outright disrespectful. The explicit singling out of newly elected women of color. Now that is a much more potent comment there. And the Democratic Party and Pelosi are playing with fire here. Four women are trying to figure out how to respond, texting one another and weighing whether to confront Pelosi. They asked her to stop, but for now they're focused on their congressional duties, which is very wise, as they defend their votes in the House that have drawn ire from Pelosi. Thank God my mother gave me broad shoulders and a strong back. I can handle it. I'm not worried about this. This is from Ayanna Presley of Boston, who called Pelosi's comments demoralizing. I'm not worried about the signals that it sends to people I speak to, and from there, and sent me here with a mandate to act. The tension underscores the political and generation divide between the most powerful woman in America, who has led the House Democrats for more than 16 years, and a new brand of liberals. They are actually progressives, clamoring for change and trying to push the party left. Pelosi has spent more than 30 years perfecting the inside game to secure wins for a party, most notably the Affordable Care Act. Incidentally, the Affordable Care Act appeared before a three-judge circuit in New Orleans, Court of Appeals, that could rule against it and headed on to the Supreme Court. The four freshman lawmakers, by contrast, have built a massive online following, leveraged their power outside, including the 2020 presidential race. Their ability to work together, to refuse to, will have major implications for Democrats as they seek to oust DJ Trump. Knows the fate that her majority rests with moderate Democrats who captured Republican-held seats in last year's election. The majority is a fragile thing, she says, according to two people present during the remarks. Well, no doubt about that. Sometimes the leader's got to take a position to keep the team unified. That is from Gregory Meeks. He's from New York. She knows what got us here and what's going to keep us here. Pelosi suggests New York Times columnist Maureen Dow. She's been around since literally, as LBJ would say, Christ was a proverbial corporal. That the so-called squad has a limited following inside the House. She specifically points to example of a House-passed border bill in late June, which the group opposed. Well, yes, the group did oppose it, and they were rightly to oppose it, but some other people ran scared. These people have their public views or whatever in their Twitter world. Pelosi said in the New York Times interview, but they don't have any following. That's a lie. They are for people who that how many votes they got. Several caucuses were uncomfortable with Pelosi's comments. The Progressive Caucus, no doubt about it, and according to two officials familiar with the plan, other women of color in the House have expressed concerns, and then they should have concerns. I can't tell the speaker to apologize, but I was taken aback by the remarks. That is from Jana Hayes of Connecticut, the first African-American woman to represent her state. Most notably, Hayes, Ocasio, and Omar appeared together with Pelosi smiling on the cover of a Rolling Stone photo in January, which they never would have taken it, after upsetting Joseph Crowley. Anyway, still Pelosi tries to create a bridge with the New Yorker during a face-to-face meeting. Now, half a year later, virtually all communication between the two women have ceased. The two have not spoken to one another since February, when Ocasio-Cortez declined Pelosi's personal request that she join her select committee on climate change, a waste of time. And let me finish this up here. Omar, according to people close to her, has been similarly disappointed. The Minnesota lawmaker looked up to Pelosi and has enjoyed a positive relationship with the speaker, despite her criticism of Israel, the Zionist state. Pelosi gave Omar a heads up before chilling her public. Anyway, that is politics. To Raisha Tabuli, Pelosi's latest comments amount to a mixed message, one that seems to contradict the advice Pelosi gave in a meeting early in her tenure. Represent your district, Pelosi said. Recall Pelosi telling her, ruffled feathers during a CNN interview, that she would probably not support Pelosi for the speaker. But anyway, she's on the Financial Service Committee. Jay Fed Chair was there at the House Financial Committee. That is chaired by Auntie Waters of South Central Los Angeles. And on Numbers Man, we'll have some of the testimony. At least we will read some of it. And I believe we have some of the audio of Jerome Powell, of the chair of the Fed. Whatever is she's saying is not going to impact my work, Tbilisi said of Pelosi's comments over the weekend. No doubt about that. They will keep on moving on. That's all they can do. She chose her words carefully. She did not misspeak. As some representative and Esso, a close friend of Pelosi's. Well, anyway, that is out there, and they have declined to call Pelosi out by name as she sidelines some of their policies. Medicare for all, but Medicare for all in the campaign is getting a lot of publicity. That a Green New Deal is getting a lot of publicity out there, and she can only, that is Pelosi, can only look forward there. All right, let's move on here and see where. Just checking to find some stories that we had not covered to make sure we get them in here And this is the Federal Reserve here. We want the question of the census. DJ Trump has backed down. That's the only way you can put it. There will be no census, no question on citizenship on the 2020 census. What he's doing is by executive order just asking federal agencies to supply the numbers that they have. That has already been requested. Those numbers will be there. And once you have the numbers, the way this works is there can be a model, and the Census Bureau has models where they can place this data out here and you can look at it. Let me just reiterate the Moody's study here, since we have it up here. This was out of the Post, so we actually have it. Moody's Analytics said climate change would cost $69 trillion. That's by 2100 there. And they put this out here, 69 trillion. Now the U.S. economy is an $18 trillion economy, period. This gives you the idea of it. Models are more and more putting it in. They cite a report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change saying warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2.7 Fahrenheit is increasingly seen by scientists as a climate stabilizing limit and would cause $54 trillion by the end of the century. But what is going on, the permanent summer ice melt in the Arctic Ocean predicts rising temperatures would universally hurt workers' health and productivity, that more frequent extreme events will increase disruption and damage critical infrastructure and property. From Mark Zanni. Dr. Zanni is the chief economist there. He was the advisor to the late John McCain in 2008. Climate change, Dr. Zanni said, is not a cliff event. It's not a shock to the economy. It's more like corrosion, more corrosive, He added, if one is getting weightier with each year passage, the investor service of major credit ratings, Moody's, has already said that it wants to take climate change into account when weighting financial health of companies and municipalities. Now, this is something that's starting, and this ties in with our program on the city of New Orleans and various other places. The campfire fire out in California. In fact, there's a bill there to absorb the PCE, the electrical utility in California, of some of their liability. Not a good idea. Said that water and vector-borne diseases such as malaria and dengue fever would likely be an effect and economies that it would hurt. Brazil, of course, they had Jabo, is the right-wing fascist president that's cutting down the Amazon. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So this is one of the things. In Saudi Arabia, GDP will drop 10% by 2048. So that is much closer. We're going to 220, so about less than 30 years. 12 large economies. India will be in the worst hit with GDP growing by, and we see this recurring by 2.5% more slowly, that is, and this is something that we'll see more and more of. Most models go out 30 years, but it's really the damage to the economy in the next half century. That is 50 years. So we have to start looking at things differently. One of the biggest insurance firms, this is Chubb, in the U.S., said it was no longer selling insurance to new coal-fired plants. So this is something that is here and is being looked to. There's no doubt about it. Now let me see where we are. Chairman Jerome Powell here, and see if we can. Anyway, we'll go to the people at the University of Virginia. we'll need to, let's see, what are we going to need to do here? I believe documents here, and we should be able to find them. But we'll see. Got to get the right crystal ball up. Yeah, this is it. 270 to win. Notes on state politics. Of course, we remember Ross Perot, the late great Ross Perot, and his race in 1992. He was running a third party, got 19% of the vote at that time. Ross Perot, remember him. Several people, of course, have died. Rip Torn, we'll have to remember, may rest in peace. Also, our VP to Rip Torn. More one of the great political actors. This is by Larry Sabato and Kyle Klondike of the Crystal Ball on the 11th of July. Ross Perot, who died earlier this week, proved something of a template, provided something of a template for DJ Trump. He also was the best performing third party candidate since Teddy Roosevelt, and that was in 1912. But there are no top tier races. There are has been noteworthy Senate developments in the outer fringes of competitive race maps in Kansas and Kentucky and Virginia. Let me get down this. That was some of the takeaways here. Ross Perot has a great quote from Dr. George McGovern. He was a nominee and South Dakota senator. You know, sometimes when you say you've heard you're ahead of your time, it's just a polite way of my pointer isn't working like I want it to work here. It's just a polite way of saying you have a real bad sense of timing. Given how American politics has developed over the half century, that may be fitting to look at the businessman Ross Perot. Died at 89. Perot ran two of the most credible third-party presidential bids in American history. The 19%, that was in 1992, and a still impressive 8% in 1996. Despite his showing, he didn't win any electoral votes. Confirmation of how the Electoral College perpetuates the two-party duopoly. Move my pointer along here. Needlessly, the themes of Perot's campaign provided something of a preview of DJ Trump as he ran as an outsider populist campaign that was critical of so-called free trade. There's no such thing as free trade. That's an idea that Adam Smith had that really never got off the ground. Perot's economic orthodoxy, at least as expressed in his campaign, probably existed to the left of the GOP, which one could also say about Trump, at least if the candidate, as a candidate, not necessarily in practice as president. No, DJ Trump moved exclusively closer to the GOP. This is not to say Perot and platform were twins. Contrary to Trump, Perot was pro-choice on abortion, and Texas didn't engage in race baiting. There's no doubt about that, which is a staple of Trump's career before and during the White House. Perhaps if Perot had been 25 years younger and came around in 2016 Republican primary instead of Trump, he would be in the White House right now. Probably so. Perot ended up something of a front runner to Trump. Homestead quips and memorable sound bites were different than Trump. Of course, at the time, Ross Perot was not on Twitter. Often coarse ones, but the same effects in his follow. The most fervent base prior to Trump, you would be called the Peronists. As it was, Perot produced the best presidential vote share of any non-Democrat. Now, he was the third-party person, and they point back here to Teddy Roosevelt and Bull Moose, the progressive. He won 27% of the vote. That's in 1912. A totally different time in America at that time. Of course, Teddy had been a president. And now we look at some of these third-party presidential candidates. In 1912, Theodore Roosevelt had 27.39% there. He got 41.38% of Democratic vote, 23% of the Republican vote there. And then we had Alan Benson, who ran as a socialist candidate in 1916, 49.5% percentage from Democrats, 46.11 from the Republicans, and he ended up with a total of 3.18. Eugene Debs, who ran from Terre Haute, Indiana, quite literally from prison, he got 34.12 from the Democrats and 60.35% of votes. He was finally tallied at 3.14, a little bit better there. And Robert La Follette out of Wisconsin ran 1924. He got 16.262 a percentage there. And Norman Thomas, who ran continuously in 28, he was at 0.73, and in 1932, Norman Thomas got 2.36. He would be a social democrat. He got 57.41 from the Democrats, 39.65 from the Republicans, and 2.94 from others. That would be an interesting takeaway today. And let's get some of these other candidates here. 1936, Lemke. I'm not sure who Lemke ran as a unionist person there at 1.95. Norman Thomas again in 1940 as a socialist, 0.23 is what he got. And 1944, no candidate, Texas regulars, 0.28. And in 1948, the segregationist States' Rights Party, Strom Thurmond, 2.14% there, and out of that, he got 49.55. The Democrats, 45.27 there. And let's see, no candidate on pledge. We won't get into that. And in 1968, George C. Wallace, the American Independent Party, he got 13.53. That was coming of age there. And then another right wing, John Smets, in 1972, 1.42% there. Eugene McCarthy, 1976, 0.91% there. John Anderson ran in 1980, former Republican, still alive as far as I know, out of Illinois. He got 6.61%. And let's see, 1984, David Berglund, it was a Libertarian, 0.25%, not 0.25%. Ron Paul is a Libertarian in 1988 at 0.47% there. This has been kind of interesting here. One thing you have noticed less and less. Well, and we have Ross Perot, 18.91%. He ran in 1992 and 8.40 in 1996. Rav Nader ran as a Green in 2000. He got 2.74%, 48.38 from the Democrats, 47.87 from the Republicans, and from non-aligned 3.75. Then in 2004, he ran as an independent. He got 0.38% there. Rav Nader again. He ran in 2008. Did a little better, not 0.56 there. And in 2012, 2016, Garrett Johnson. Johnson did better in 2016. He got 3.27, and he's 48.02 from the Democrats, 45.93 from the Republicans there. So there we go. And they have a little note here in 1968, one faithless elector, they call, in North Carolina cast his vote for George Wallace rather than Richard Nixon. In 72, one elected in Virginia cast his vote for Libertarian John Hopser rather than but Nixon. That was in 72. I don't know. We didn't have him there. Anyway, Hopser was the founder of the Libertarian Party. Was a professor at the University of Minnesota, of all places. Let's see. Bush would have beaten back Clinton's challenge. Hypotheticals are difficult to prove, but we live the evidence accumulated from the onward strongly suggests that Clinton would have won a two-party contest and received the elusive majority. He failed to win in 1992. He got 43% of the vote and 49% of the vote in 1996. But judge for yourself there, no doubt about that. There's a video here, the myth that Perot cost Bush the 92 election. Well, a myth or not a myth, several people say that, but in Dallas, Texas, Ross Perot announced the election of William Jefferson Clinton, so you take it as you think. We at this mic believe that some of those Perot voters, I've talked to several of those, remember that time, that would have voted for Bush, but voted for Perot. I remember, in fact, Harry Carey endorsed Perot in Wrigley Field. Some people didn't like that. When asked if Perot had not been on the ballot, 38% of respondents say they would have voted for Bush, and 38% said they would have voted for Clinton. Still, Clinton already had a lead of 5% over Bush. This split even gave the election a majority vote to the Democrats. Well, wishful thinking. The Post article was published in 92, focused on Election Day. It concluded that Perot did not change the outcome. Well, again, that is one of those things out there. MSNBC also published something when Trump was considering running as an independent representative. Public showed that Bush would have needed to win 2/3 of the Perot vote to win in 1992. So now to the Senate. National Republicans groaned Monday as Chris Kobach, far-left type in Kansas, former Secretary of State, a weak gubernatorial candidate, announced a bid for the Senate. While Kansas is very Republican, it hasn't elected a Democrat since 1932. It also has a significant contingent of moderate Republicans that recoiled at Kobach's candidacy. We moved the race from state Republican to likely Republican. Well, we'll have to see who is running there. DJ Trump endorsed Kobach for governor, and it didn't do him any good. Now, this seat is by Pat Roberts, who has been resting up, showed himself a weak performer in 2014, announced he had beaten independent Greg Orman. We remember him by about 11 points. That was in 2014. While amid stirring GOP environment was still the weakest showing for a GOP senator there since the 1996 special election held to replace Bob Dole. In any event, there could be a very competitive race on both sides. Besides Kobach, the state treasurer LaTurner, former NBA player David Lindstrom, already, I guess, running as a Republican. Representative Marshall and State Representative Susan Wigley, I suppose, also joined the race. Mark Serap, American Conservative Union frequent TV defender of the president, is another possible. His wife Mercedes recently joined the presidential re-election campaign. Former Representative Nancy Border and a former U.S. attorney there, and State Senator Barbara Balder. I'm not sure who these characters are. Senate Majority Leader. Now, this has been talked about before in Kentucky. Made no secret of the fact that his dream candidate is Mike Pompeo, who used to represent Kansas. I don't know if he'll be back or not. Nonetheless, Amy McGrath, she's entered a race in Kentucky. She lost a close race against Andy Barr in Kentucky 6 last fall, but something of a national sensation. And her primary upset against the former Lexington Mayor Jim Gary, who himself challenged Rand Paul. They have it rated as likely the Republican there. I thought Beshear was running. Let's see if that's Governor Matt Blevin is very weak numbers. Needlessly triumphed against Democratic challenger who would probably be McGrath. The Attorney General Andy Beshear will be more of a signal that Bluegrass State isn't really open to voting Democrat for much of anything these days. It's not a guarantee McGrath will have the Democratic field to herself. We'll see. She is a former pilot, I believe. And let's see, one other note, Mark Warner, he's been around forever in Virginia, picked up a challenge of former Scott Taylor. That doesn't matter very much in Virginia. Taylor won in, but lost a close race to Elaine Lura, I suppose. That's Virginia 2. Independent way to hurt. Anyway, Taylor has his problems, but he's also a better candidate than the Republicans might otherwise field there. They have Corey Stewart. Oh, boy. A neo-Confederate rebel-rouser. Anyway, Virginia is one of those states that has moved past what it used to be. I wouldn't pay very much attention to these ratings. Crystal ball, some of the crystal ball ratings here. I don't see much going on here. Let me see what they're doing here. Looking at the ratings, they have Texas, Kansas, all Republican there, Kentucky. Let's see how they're doing. It's likely Republican, I guess, what they call that. Safe Republican, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, Tennessee, South Carolina. Some toss-up races there in, well, North Carolina is actually, South Carolina, excuse me. North Carolina and Georgia are toss-ups according to them. And who will go with no elections in California, Nevada, Utah. And let me see, Minnesota, likely Democrat. Michigan, no election in Wisconsin. So there's a lot of states. Pennsylvania doesn't have anything going this year out there. So there's a lot of states that would have probably had something going but didn't have it going. Anyway, Justin Amish, well, he's going to run as an independent. He is out of Grand Rapids, I believe. And we'll see how he does. He was at the Freedom. He's a libertarian, so we don't know. Said like a Republican. Now they moved it to a toss-up. That's in Amish. I guess that's Michigan 3. Yeah, that's the district Gerald Ford they used to have there. Grand Rapids, Amway, and period. To borrow the immortal words of Keith Richards, he walked before they made him run. The Republicans are not going to allow Amish to remain in their caucus. He's already quit following his departure from the party. And his Western Michigan-based districts affected a version of the seat that Gerald Ford had. DJ Trump won it by, 51 to 42% there. That's Michigan 3. The heart of the district is the Democratic city of Grand Rapids. Well, it used to be a Republican city. A county seat is Kent County. That's usually Republican, but Democrats are trending there. Trump, let me see. If you're looking for a place that voted for Trump in 2016 but might vote for Democrat in 2020, that is Kent County, Michigan. Anyway, some of the things coming up here, and we'll add as we move along here on this particular circuit. Anyway, this will do it for now. Maybe in the editing we'll add a few things to the end of the broadcast if sporting scores come out. We, of course, had the All-Star break and, of course, report that the American League was, 5-4 once again over our National League people there. And basically, I don't have the standings here now. Oh, one other thing, I guess we'll report maybe we'll spend some more time on that. The Chicago Defender has finally moved from a print newspaper, I should say, to a digital newspaper. And there was a comment on the BBC about Mr. Martin, Roland S. Martin. I didn't recall that he was actually president of the publisher, I suppose, of the Chicago Defender. He was there, and he was, of course, ahead of his time. He wanted to go digital during his tenure, and he couldn't convince the management at the time to go digital. There's many things in Chicago, and nothing to Emma Young out there. They have been backward in a number of things. So it never became digital, and when they are now owned, I believe, by New Media, an African-American outfit, but they have now gone digital. They had more digital readers than print readers, I think about 16,000. And even with the additional ad that you could get there. But other print media have been very successful. The Washington Post, whom we rely upon some of their work, and the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, etc. One of our favorite newspapers, the People's World, they've been digital for a long time. That was the Daily Worker. We'll get more of them, and we get information from the public news people. So this will do it for us. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on the week that was. Numbers Man will be coming up with testimony in the House Financial Committee by Jerome Powell, the Fed chair. And we'll talk about other things, including the tenuous economy that is out. We have a numbers man, we have an open source report. All of these have migrated finally over to Google Podcasts. They used to separate it out as Android Podcasts, but now it is Google Podcasts, a big deal there. And you get into iHeart. iHeart's been very big in internet radio. Of course, it's a radio station. You can see us at Spotify. We're on Spotify. You can also say Boston Red or Numbers Man and the smart speakers. We're not great advocates of the smart speakers, but they're out there. You can do that. And we'll pop up. So there are numerous ways to do it. And as usual, we encourage our listeners to share the broadcast, the audio, pass it around, copy it, send it to your friends. Usually they're a little long, sometimes not as long, but they're usually packed with information that people need to know to develop their own analysis and research. We don't tell people here how to vote, period. We're, of course, a Bernie operation. We don't keep that a secret. And number 2 in our pecking order is Liz Warren, and number 3, Beto O'Rourke. And Liz Warren, Beto O'Rourke, he's 4, Amy Klobuchar. Good day.